humility. I don't think most people are prepared for the amount of humility needed on the deepest spiritual path. I just don't think that most people, in a way, consider it or have even the capacity for it in our Western society that is entrenched and foundationally built in so many ways on the ego structure and the sense of self, whatever sense of self that might be, whether that's a strong sense of self or a weak sense of self, it's still a sense of self. And one thing that I've learned over the years, in so many different ways, is that, without humility, freedom is never going to be known. And what is this humility? The humbling of the ego, the humbling of the sense of self, a humbling, yeah? Whether it's a weak sense of self or a strong sense of self, it's the surrender of the sense of self. But it's not an intellectual surrender of the sense of self. It's a visceral feeling. And the thing about humility, as much as we would like to consider it a kind of spiritual practice, I've considered my life and I meditate and I do lots of practices and stuff, and I've humbled myself. Well, yes and no. It depends how attached, how caught one is in the sense of self, in the reactive self, like I was talking about a couple of days ago. In the opinion of the self. If your opinion matters most, if what matters most is your opinion, which comes from the sort of, this really need to uphold a sense of self, because everything hangs on it and everything hangs on the opinion that you carry, then you'll never know humility. You can't know humility unless you're brought to your knees. Now, I was blessed, really, although it didn't really feel like it at the time, but I was blessed by my first teacher in 1995 that I met, who, within, I would say, 4 hours of meeting him, he didn't know who I was, I didn't know who he was. I think I've talked about this in a previous video. I within 3 or 4 hours, he brought me to my knees, and to the ego self, he humiliated me. I thought I was going to be first in line of 30 guys to be ushered into what's the men's lodge. I thought I was going to be first in line because I had a kind of sense of specialness. I thought I was special. And I was last. He made me wait until last, and then, from this sense of specialness where I thought I was going to be first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, 8th, 10th, 12th, 20th, 25th, I was last, the last person sitting there, the last guy sitting there, and he humiliated me. He said, "You don't want to be here, you can leave." And I decided I had to stay. I don't know why. Could have. See, the ego would have walked out. It would have said, "Fuck you, I'm leaving." But there was some part of me that stayed, and burned, the humiliation of it, the anger, you know, the sort of deep sense of rejection that I felt when I was no longer special, the special one. And I pretty much had to beg him to stay. And, you know, this sounds terrible to the ego self, but, you know, he was so intelligent, deeply intelligent. And I don't know whether he knew that he was that. He just did that, and he you know, something changed within me, something broke within me, something was humiliated, but that humiliation didn't stay on the level of the self, on the level of humiliation. It broke something open, and what it broke open, it actually was the truth of me that came out. I mean, I wasn't weak after that. You know, I was very angry. I was very angry, and in the, you know, talking circles later, that anger, you know, came right up. It came up like a wild, ferocious, you know, volcano, and that was the true me. That was what was really going on inside me. Yeah, and the rest of it, the special one, was the facade that I was carrying around. We're all carrying these facades, and it takes maybe sometimes a master to be willing to break you open, to break that open somehow, and to stop playing the phony game of self that we play. Here we are in the collusion, and the trouble with a lot of the spirituality, it doesn't go to that place, and maybe it's not relevant anymore. You know, it used to be relevant. You know, there's a book, Chasm of Fire, Irina Tweedy, who is, I think, you know, became a great teacher, but she went to India, seemingly gave up all her possessions, I think. Long time since I read that book, but she found a Sufi master, just as, you know, no, not a big guru, just a small guy in a hut sort of thing, but was a Sufi master. And he humiliated her. He made her wait for weeks, I think, days, weeks, outside his hut, and just sit there waiting for him, and waiting for him, and waiting for him, until something sort of burned, you know, within her. Something burned away, and I think that was the same sort of thing. I think some of those old, you know, masters or teachers, you know, didn't tolerate the self, you know, the masked self, the special self, the aggrandized self, or the victim self, or any of these manifestations of the false self that we carry around. You know, I think Ram Dass has spoken to this. You know, maybe his guru Maharaji was slightly different in a way, but it was still the same vibration of sort of destroying, in a sense, one's sense of specialness. Whether that specialness is a big sense of I'm great, and this is my opinion, and this is how powerful and strong I am in the world through my opinion, and look at me. Or even whether it's the opposite of that, I'm nobody, I'm a worm, I'm useless, I'm weak, I'm ineffectual, you know, I haven't got anything to offer the world. You know, these are both versions of the self, and they both need to be given up. The whole thing needs to be given up. Somehow, the whole thing needs to be given up. And sometimes, for a lot of people, and for most people, you know, a catalyst, as I've talked about previously in one of my videos, there has to be a catalyst. And usually, in many ways, that might come from another person. Now, we don't have many other people, you know, because most people are watching YouTube and reading books and stuff like that, you know, so it's a little bit difficult, because what happens in these situations with videos and books and everything like that, as soon as something gets a little bit difficult, as soon as it touches a nerve, as soon as something that somebody says, as soon as something goes in, and it's like you don't like it, you know, it's like, oh well, that's not, I disagree with that. I get this all the time on YouTube. Oh, I disagree with that. You're just wrong. You know, well, what you're saying is rubbish. And you know, this kind of thing. I mean, it might be, but you can feel inside it that the people have made up their mind. And the worst thing you can ever do in spirituality is make up your mind. In this kind of spirituality that we're talking about, because as long as the mind is made up, yeah, you're safe. You're in the safe zone. My mind is made up. I know what's what, and he's right and she's wrong, and they are and I'm not, and you know, and just continuously upholds this sense of self. And that there's no way to freedom there. There's no way to freedom. Something intrinsic has to come undone. I don't know is the best response. Yeah, you watch a video, you read a book, it resonates, it doesn't resonate, somebody says something, you know, I don't know whether, is it right, is it wrong? I don't know. It sounds weak, but it's strong. It's the opposite of what you think it is. And so to be able to kind of somehow get in, undo, victim self, aggrandized self, strong self, weak self, who cares? You know, something has to come undone, and that's where humility comes in. A humility to really embrace not knowing, and that allows something. It allows some. There's my dog. It allows a kind of openness to emerge, a kind of softness, a tenderness. This is humility has a tenderness in it. For a lot of us, yeah, not everybody is built in the same way. I'm just talking to people who, you know, who might need to know that you have to consider that humility is a really remarkable quality that takes you deeper. Yeah. And you, in spirituality, this kind of spirituality can't just go on and on and on and on, wanting to deepen, wanting to open, and keeping hold of this, you know, strong sense of self. Let go of the strong sense of self. Be vulnerable. Be vulnerable. That's what happened in that field that I was talking about with the wrathful teacher. I thought I was going to be first, and I was last, and sitting there in that field, really pretty much alone, after all the other 29 guys had gone, and I was there, and he was just there with another guy, kind of, you know, looking at me. You know, I sort of went from hero to zero. I went from, you know, a sort of, I mean, I was never that strong anyway, but I did think I was special, to a worm. Yeah, to feeling so vulnerable. Suddenly I was alone in the universe. Yeah, the field sort of turned metaphorically into the universe. And there I was, little fragile me, alone, sort of abandoned, vulnerable, tender, almost cast out, you know, revealed, maybe. Revealed as the tender person I actually was. I said, he did me a great gift. Yeah, he did me gave me a great gift. And I think about it, and I think about him all of the time. His name was Shivam O'Brien, and I think about him a lot because that sort of thing doesn't come along often in life, and when it does, my God, you know, that was something graced me by being exposed to him, because it takes a master to break somebody open in love when the love is greater, but the love doesn't emerge as, oh, there we are, Kavi, you are special. It's the opposite. It's like, the love is so great, you'll reveal, you know, he's prepared to kind of be the one who takes the position of saying, no, you're not special in the way that you think you are. It's much deeper than that, this existence. It's a deep existence, yeah? And you have to let go of being special or weak or strong, because you have to become who you really are. And who you really are is way down, way deeper than that. None of these nonsense opinions you have about yourself, or the mask you wear of specialness or anything like that. None of that matters. It's down there somewhere, and something has to break open in order to access that is down there. And it takes courage, and it took me courage, and it will take you courage, and it does take you courage. But you have that courage. Courage is not special to me. I was just willing to throw myself into the fire of transformation. And being humble is one of those things. Surrender, humility, kindness. Yeah, just like keep dropping it. Whatever it is, when the self builds, because the self has built up over time. Now it's an edifice. Yeah, and then you go on the spiritual path and you find something vulnerable, tender, broken or something, and you touch it a little bit, and it's like, wow, what's that? It's so vulnerable or so raw or something. And then there it is, the self will build up again, you know, and it comes back. Oh, I don't like this. I don't like that. I don't want this. I'm too scared of this. I've got to protect, you know, and all of this kind of stuff. And that's just natural. It happens, but come back. Whatever it is, come back. Yeah, when the self rebuilds itself, as it will do, come back and see it again and open up again. This by and by, this movement changes something in you, changes something in us. And it takes time. It just takes time. It takes time and perseverance, if you like. You know, it's really, you know, this point about humility, which is a kind of vulnerability, is really important. And people just don't know it. People just don't kind of want it in so many ways. And you know, I see this. You know, you're putting out videos like this. I put out videos like this where it's, you know, I don't feel like I'm pontificating in any way. I'm just trying to lay the raw nuts and bolts of my experience, you know, as what's happened to me and what I've learned from it along the path of life. And you get people who come along who are just very, very decided, very, very vociferous about what they feel, yeah, and what they know, and how, you know, and then they're definite about what they know. And I would say don't be definite about anything that you think you know. I would just say that, because it actually opens a deeper door, because then you can be curious about the world. You can be curious about what's going on. You know, you could be curious about what somebody is saying. There's no threat in it. Yeah, no, nobody's trying to do anything to anybody else. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. Nobody cares about this. Nobody really cares. Everybody cares about themselves. That's the way the world is. Certainly the way the world of the, you know, structured society and the conditioned self is. We just care about ourselves. And so that's it. That's what I wanted to say. Humility is a door that opens to the soul, really. And it's a tender one to go down. And beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.